Hey y'all, the name's Nick, and today I want to talk you through the entire process for creating this illustration from start to finish and hopefully share some tips and tricks along the way. So, let's get into it. So I usually work at 8 inches wide by 10 inches tall. Since my illustrations are viewed almost exclusively on phones, I stick to a vertical format. But 8 by 10 is also a common size for paper and picture frames if I want to turn an illustration into a print. I set the resolution to 300 and use RGB color since I'm focusing primarily on digital. Once I've got a rough idea in my head of what I want to illustrate, I always start out with references, so you can see me awkwardly Googling photos of kids in bathtubs. I pull a reference for every major component because you think you know what something looks like, but you're probably missing a lot of important details. For example, try to draw a horse from memory and see how that goes. So now it's time to translate what's in my head to the computer. Brushes aren't a make or break, and I've seen people do amazing things with the standard round brush in Photoshop, but I really enjoy a good brush. And these days, if you're paying for Photoshop on Creative Cloud, you can download a ton of brushes for free. When I'm sketching, I like to use a chunky brush and be fast and loose with my strokes. I lower the opacity so that my lines overlap. It should get pretty messy, but it allows you to make happy accidents that might lead to inspiration. I change colors when I'm moving between main elements and separate them into their own layers. Here I'm starting to draw my character, followed by the boat. What I love most about drawing digitally over analog is that I can rapidly experiment with composition. I warp and stretch my layers until I get it just right. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned is to squint at your work. When you squint, you're only able to focus on composition. Your sketch is your roadmap, so I never move forward until my sketch looks good through squinty eyes. I think of this next step more like carving than drawing. I've got this chunky, rough sketch that I'm trying to find the beauty in and define. So I'm using a smaller brush and I've turned off the opacity. With one hand on the undo key, I'm redrawing each and every line multiple times until it looks right. The next step is color blocking. This is another really important step that will allow you to figure out nearly all of your color choices. I'm going to use a standard round feathered brush and start coloring in my sketch. I'm looking to first apply the true colors, or the colors that aren't affected by light. Then I decide where my light's coming from, and using blend layers will start to add the highlights and the shadows. I'll scale that down and put it in the corner so I can color pick from it as I go. With my sketch and my color reference, I'm ready to start the final illustration. I'm starting with the dinosaur, and what I like to do first is lasso the silhouette. I fill it with a base color and add the other true colors. Then I apply my shadows and highlights in new layers on top of that. All the while, I'm eyedropping from my reference up in the corner. And now I just repeat that over and over with every element in the drawing. I've got all the core components in, and if I take a minute to squint at my illustration, it looks almost identical to my color blocking reference. So at this point, I can start to add the fine details. I tend to have one primary brush throughout an illustration that I'm just scaling up and down. A brush gives your illustration a particular look, and mixing brushes can confuse the style and ruin the cohesion. But there are a few secondary brushes I may use that expedite the process. Here I'm using the splatter brush that allows me to really quickly get a random bubble texture. The final step for my process is going through with a fine line and adding the details to the main elements. I don't want to detail everything because I want to create a sense of focus, so I leave the shampoo bottles on the sides of the tub pretty basic. Level of detail is totally stylistic preference, and for me, the details are what makes an illustration interesting. Some people are more into the message or use of color, but I really geek out on details. When I think I'm getting close to finishing an illustration, I'll often flip it. It gives you somewhat of a fresh perspective on your own work. I sat with this for a day and something just didn't feel right. I realized that the kid felt hollow. His expression wasn't telling me anything, so I decided to push it a bit further. I started by looking at reference photos of happy kids. I wanted this version to have more dimension and detail, real eyeballs and a real mouth. I think it'll end up feeling more relatable. Now, coloring faces is really hard. There's so many curves and creases and colors. It's something that I don't feel incredibly confident in, but I'm pushing myself to get better. Once I've got a good expression, I draw the dimensional lines to help me understand the 3D shape of the face, which informs me on how the light would hit his face. I still haven't found a way to color quickly. It's a lot of trial and error and blending colors. The final step was adding water droplets to his face and doing a couple brightness and contrast tweaks with adjustment layers. In the end, this drawing took me between 5 and 6 hours to complete, and I think it's really important that you know that. There's nothing more frustrating for me than seeing an amazing 30-minute speed painting that someone did over their lunch break. Illustration takes time, and if I don't like something I've made, it's a clear indication that I simply haven't spent enough time on it. Well, that's it. I hope you're able to take something from this video, and if there's anything you'd like to learn more about, just let me know in the comment section below. I'm on Instagram @thenamesnick, and you can see all of my illustrations there. I'm gonna get back to drawing. See you around.